So how do you get a leg up on the competition? Whenever I see the words leg and competition in the same sentence, I can't help but think of winning. You may be sitting there wondering, what does a leg even have to do with competition or winning for that matter? When I was born, the doctor declared to my parents, she has all 10 fingers and all 10 toes. She's absolutely perfect. Well, that was easy. If that's all it takes to be perfect is having all 10 fingers and all 10 toes. But very shortly after that, my mother realized that my right leg was significantly shorter than my left leg. So they brought in an orthopedic specialist the next day who declared to my young parents, your daughter has a birth defect. I was born without the middle half of my right leg. And he went on to say, I'm sorry, but she will probably never even walk. Now, I'm old, but I'm not that old, and so I'm sure he must have meant she will probably never walk with two real legs, because thanks to modern prosthetics, I actually learned to walk by the time I was 2 years old, and even though I do walk rather funny or rather uniquely, learning to walk was never one of my problems. What became one of my biggest struggles throughout my entire life was learning how to love and accept myself because I was different. I didn't want to be the crippled girl. I didn't want to walk funny. I wanted to be like all of the other kids and fit in with them. And I had a secret dream. Have you ever had one of those dreams? You know, the kind that you think is so ridiculous and so crazy that it's not ever going to come true. And you kind of hold it down deep inside of you because you're afraid that if you share it with somebody, either your family or one of your friends, they're just going to laugh at you. Well, I had a dream like that when I was a kid growing up, and it was to be an Olympic athlete. Now that truly, to me, was a crazy, ridiculous, never going to happen dream. My first exposure to competitive sports was in PE class during school. Now, I could have gotten out of PE. All I had to do was bring a doctor's note. I think it's pretty funny. First of all, there were no expectations placed on any disabled children at that time to do anything athletic whatsoever. But then this whole idea of a doctor's note, what was a doctor going to do? Say, well, she's only got one leg, years of education to determine that, and nope, I don't think it's ever going to grow back. But I didn't want to get a doctor's note because I wanted to prove to all the other kids that I could do everything that they could do. Unfortunately, I just never measured up leg for leg with all the other kids. You remember what it was like in PE class, right? The teacher would pick 2 team captains. Who were they? The best athletes in the class, right? And that kind of bumped them up on popularity points. They would stand, one on each side, and the students were all laid out in front of them, and they would begin to pick off their teams. The first one would say, I want you. And then the next one, I want you. And who did they pick? The best athletes in the class. I want you. And I want you. And there I stood, waiting to be picked. And finally, I guess just to save me some kind of face, the teacher would assign me to a team. And I would walk over with my beautiful walk to my team. And I could see their faces as they were now calculating, what are our chances of winning now that we've got the one-legged girl on our team? So being an Olympic athlete was not likely to ever happen to somebody like me. I hated having one leg. I hated being different. I didn't like all the lumps in all of the wrong places. I had a grocery list of things about myself that I didn't like, that I would have changed if I could. Now, I think every single person in this room probably has something about yourself that you would change if you could. Some of ours are just more visible than others, right? Well, I realized one day that feeling sorry for myself was never going to allow me to be a winner at anything in life. I could not change my body, but I could change the way I viewed my body. I could learn to love and accept this leg that I was given as a precious gift. I could see it as a blessing. And when I began to shift my belief as something that I thought was my greatest weakness and learned to love it and embrace it as a strength, because now I stood out in a crowd. Now I was memorable. Now I could do things that other kids couldn't do. Suddenly it became a gift, and it changed everything for me. When I was a senior in high school, I received a phone call one morning, and it was from a woman named Jan, and she says, "Roni, would you like to learn how to ski?" I had wanted to learn how to ski because I thought it was something that I could actually do. Now, Jan also had one leg just like me, and so we went up to the mountain together. She set me up with all the equipment that I would need. I used one ski, one boot, and the only adaptive equipment that I used was these things called outriggers. Outriggers were like forearm crutches with ski tips on the end. And so we got up there. Now, I had visions of myself going up the chairlift and just immediately sliding down that mountain, just gracefully and beautifully, and impressing everybody around me. I could not wait to get on the mountain. And we got up there, and she says, "The first thing we're going to learn is how to fall." I said, "Wait a minute. Did I hear her right? Did she just say, I'm going to learn how to fall? Do you know who you're talking to? I am an expert at falling. You don't need to teach me that." I says, "I fall all the time. I've been doing it all along, and I have a confession to make to you. I'm afraid I'm going to fall on this stage because it's just a little bit spongy and just enough to trip me up. So I got to be really careful. I was an expert." And she said, "No, you don't understand. You see, if you can learn to fall safely when you're skiing, then you won't get hurt." She says, "Even more importantly is if you feel comfortable falling, then you'll ski better because you will have more confidence and you won't be held back by the fear of falling." And she said, "And then, even more importantly than that, is learning how to get back up after you've fallen." And I was so glad that she taught me how to fall that day, because out of everything else that I tried to learn, it was the only thing that I perfected. Because that's all I did all day was fall down and get back up, fall down and get back up. And it was so hard to get back up because everything was so awkward. Isn't it like that when we fall? It's so hard to get back up. That equipment just wanted to pull me right back down to the ground. Little did I realize that that lesson that she taught me was going to be one of the very things that was going to allow me to achieve one of my greatest goals and dreams in life. A couple years later, that same woman, Jan, called me up and asked me if I wanted to enter my first ski race. I wasn't ready. I said, "I don't know if I can do a whole run without falling." She says, "Oh, it'll be fine. You'll be skiing against other one-legged skiers, and they're all beginners just like you." I go, "Oh, okay, if that's the case, then I'll go do it." So I went to my first regional disabled ski race, and it was at Snoqualmie Summit, east of Seattle. And when I got there, I was amazed at all of the different disabled skiers that I saw. There was a lot of them like me that only had one leg. There were skiers there with no legs. There were skiers with one arm, skiers with no arms. There were sit skiers. There were even blind skiers. Can you imagine skiing with your eyes closed? You can't see where you're going, and you have to rely on a guide that's hollering out commands to you. Turn left, turn right. This is the world that I was suddenly plunged into as a disabled ski racer. And then it was a wonderful time because I fit in just perfectly with this group of people. And lo and behold, after 2 days of racing, I guess I was the best of the worst, because I managed to make all of my runs without falling, and I won 2 gold medals. They were teeny tiny medals. Well, don't clap yet, it gets better. Thank you. They were 2 teeny tiny medals. You had to have a magnifying glass to even see them. But what it did for me is it made me decide this was the sport for me. Maybe God made me with one leg so that someday I could become a ski racer. I don't know, but it seems like a good idea to me. And not only that, but there was this thing called the U.S. Disabled Ski Team. There was this thing called the Paralympics. And I wanted to be a part of it. So I set a goal that someday I was going to be on that team and I was going to compete in that event. So I graduated from college with my degree fresh in my hand, and I went out and got a job at Kentucky Fried Chicken. And I moved to Colorado so that I could work and feed people chicken and pay to ski full-time, and I began a full-time disabled racing training program with some of the very best disabled skiers in the world. And I stuck with it until that day when I stood in the starting gate in 1992 in Albertville, France. It was the culmination of everything I'd worked for 10 years for, the first race of the Paralympics. And I looked out at the gates. The race referee said, "Racer ready." And the weather was terrible. I could hardly even see the first few gates. The snow was hitting my face. It felt like BBs. And all of a sudden, when he said, "Racer ready," I realized he wasn't asking me a question. It was time to go. And I wasn't ready to go yet. All of a sudden, all of the doubts and all of the insecurities that I had lived with my entire life came flooding into my brain in that split second of time. And I thought, I don't know if I can do this. What if I'm not good enough? And I pushed out of the starting gate. And I began to plow through all of the new heavy snow through the race course in an effort to win a medal that day. And as I rounded one of the last corners before I dropped into the finish, somehow my right arm got stuck behind me, and it spun my body around the wrong direction, and I crashed to the ground. There would be no medal for me that day. I sat there on the side of the course in those minutes. I felt so awful. And then I remembered what Jan had taught me on that first day of skiing about how hard it is to be able to get back up. When you get back up, though, it gives you a chance to start and try again. I picked myself up. I was really good at getting up by then, but I was so weighed down that day by a sense of failure. But I picked myself up so that I could start again. 2 days later, I was once again in the starting gate at the Paralympics in 1992. By this time, the weather had cleared, my mind had cleared, and I knew exactly what I had to do. When he said, "Racer ready," I charged out of that starting gate, and I skied that race course with everything I had. When I crossed the finish line, I knew I had had a good run. And I looked up at the scoreboard, and I saw that my name had moved up to the top. And I watched as racer after racer came down after me, and my name stayed in the top position, and I won a gold medal that day. And as I stood there on the podium, and they played the national anthem, I knew in that moment that it wasn't in spite of my leg that my dream had come true. It was because of it. So how do you get a leg up on the competition? Well, it really doesn't involve having legs at all. Hopefully you figured that out by now. I would challenge each one of you. Take that thing that you think is your greatest weakness, maybe your biggest imperfection, the thing that you would change that you don't like. Flip your belief around and embrace it as a gift, a blessing, so that maybe it for you can become your greatest strength one day as well. Thank you.